October 15th, 1917. Paris hasn't woken up yet. The sky is that cold, metallic blue that comes before dawn, and the air has the kind of damp bite that makes every breath feel deliberate. Inside the courtyard of Vincennes Castle, 12 French soldiers stand in a line, rifles ready, boots planted in a wet gravel. They're young, some barely old enough to have a real memory of the world before the war, and they've been told the same sentence everyone has been repeating for months, the kind of sentence that turns a human being into an object. She caused the death of 50,000 French soldiers. 50,000. It's a number too huge to hold in your head, so the mind does what it always does. It turns it into a symbol, into a story, into a face, and then she appears, and the face doesn't match the story. She isn't dragged in, she isn't screaming. She's dressed with a careful elegance that feels almost insulting against the grey misery of wartime France, like she's stepping into a final performance rather than a final punishment. A hat, a composed posture, a chin lifted a fraction too high. Someone offers her a blindfold. She refuses it. She looks directly at the man who will fire. Some accounts say she smiles, some say she blows a kiss. Others insist that she holds perfectly still, as if she's decided the last thing she'll control in this world is the way she's seen. The officer raises his saber. The rifles crack, and she doesn't fall like cinema. She doesn't throw her arms up. She doesn't collapse in a dramatic arc. She seems to sink slowly, her knees finding the ground as though her body is choosing dignity over spectacle. Then, an NCO steps forward, places a revolver near her temple, and fires once more, close and final, to make sure the legend is truly dead. That is how the story ends. The problem is that the ending doesn't answer the only question that matters. If she truly killed 50,000 men, where are the bodies of evidence that should have followed her like a shadow? Where are the stolen battle plans? The ruined offensives that can be traced back to a whisper in a hotel room, the decisive secrets that a single woman carried across borders. Because when you look closely, when you strip away the posters, the headlines, the moral panic, what you find is something far more unsettling than a neat verdict. You find a case built on fear, ambiguity, and a nation that desperately needed a villain it could point at without having to point at itself. Before she was Mata Hari, she was Margaretha Zelle. Margaretha did not arrive in the world with mystery dripping from her fingertips. She was born on August 7th, in 1876, in Leeuwarden, in the Netherlands, to a family that at first had enough money to make childhood feel safe. Her father, a head merchant, with a taste for investment and a talent for appearances, spoiled her in ways that taught a dangerous lesson early, that being adored can feel like being protected. Then the protection vanished. The money ran out. The marriage broke apart. The father drifted into another life. Her mother died when Margaretha was still a teenager, leaving behind not only grief, but a more practical wound. In a world that offered women few ways to stand on their own, a mother's absence could be an economic disaster. Margaretha was sent away by relatives to train as a teacher. She was bright, sociable, and already marked as different, with dark hair and dark eyes that made her stand out in a country of pale sameness. A classmate would later say she looked like an orchid among dandelions. It sounded poetic until you remember what it means to be the only orchid in a field of dandelions. Everyone notices you, and not everyone notices you kindly. At 16, she was expelled from school for an affair with the headmaster, a scandal that has always carried a sour aftertaste because it has never been fully clear whether it was romance, coercion, exploitation, or some messier combination. She paid the price. He kept his position. That imbalance is the first quiet warning in her story, the first hint of a pattern. Powerful systems rarely punish the powerful, but they can destroy the woman who makes the system feel embarrassed. 2 years later, she was in The Hague, restless and miserable, craving escape with the desperation of someone who cannot bear the walls closing in again. That is when she answered a Lonely Hearts advertisement posted by Captain Rudolph MacLeod, a Dutch colonial officer of Scottish descent, more than 20 years older than she was. It was not just a marriage proposal, it was a doorway. If Margaretha wanted adventure, if she wanted distance from gossip and smallness and the sense of being trapped, the Dutch East Indies offered it. Java, heat, foreignness, a new identity by sheer geography. They married in July 1895, and for a moment it must have felt like a clean cut from the old life. But Indonesia was not freedom, it was a different kind of cage. MacLeod was unfaithful and physically abusive, and in the colonial world his behavior was not merely tolerated, it was normalized, folded into the brutal social hierarchy like another accepted cruelty. Worse than the violence was the sickness. Syphilis moved through colonial garrisons with a grim inevitability, passed from mistress to officer, officer to wife, and sometimes into children who never chose anything at all. They had 2 children, Norman John and Louise John. Then their son died, and even the death refuses to be simple. Some accounts say congenital syphilis and harsh treatment destroyed his body. Others tell a darker story about a resentful servant and poison meant as a revenge. What matters is what the event did to her. It taught her that the world can take your child and still demand that you keep your face composed. It taught her that tragedy does not ask permission. It taught her that survival sometimes requires inventing a self who does not feel everything the old self felt. When she returned to Europe and divorced in 1902, she was not a romantic heroine starting over. She was a divorced woman in early 20th century Europe, which meant suspicion before she even opened her mouth. She lost stability, money, and eventually the daily closeness to her daughter. She drifted toward Paris like so many desperate people do, not because Paris is kind, but because Paris is busy, and in busy places you can become someone new before anyone has time to check your story. She arrived in 1903, and the early years were not glamorous. They were hunger, odd jobs, and the kind of humiliation that teaches you the value of control. There are accounts that she posed as an artist's model, that she tried to work as a circus rider, that she did what she had to do to eat. Then someone suggested the one thing she had that Paris would pay for: performance. Not just dance, myth. Paris in the Belle Epoque was fascinated by the East, by imagined temples and exotic rituals, by anything that made the wealthy feel they were touching forbidden knowledge without living their velvet lives. Margaretha understood this instinctively. She did not simply step onto a stage, she stepped into a fantasy the audience already wanted. She took the name Matahari, Eye of the Day, in Malay, and suddenly she was not a broke Dutch divorcee with a ruined marriage. She was a priestess, a princess, an imported mystery. She performed at the Guimet Museum and charmed the city by doing something brilliant and dangerous. She wrapped eroticism in the language of spirituality. She would strip almost naked in transparent robes, then insist it was sacred ritual, and the men in the front row could pretend their desire was cultural appreciation. She built a career on that hypocrisy, and for a while it made her untouchable. But the success she built carried a structural weakness. It depended on attention, and attention depends on novelty, and novelty always fades. By 1910, imitators multiplied, younger women appeared, critics mocked her artistry, her body changed, and her bookings slowed. As the stage lights dimmed, her relationships became more than gossip. They became income. Officers, diplomats, industrialists, politicians, people who could give gifts, apartments, jewelry, cash. The legend loves to flatten this into a cliche of Matahari as an insatiable seductress, but the more haunting interpretation suggested by letters and later reassessments is different. Her intimacy may have functioned less like appetite and more like strategy, a negotiation between loathing, need, pride, and the longing to provide for the daughter she kept losing in pieces. Her freedom might have been another form of dependence, dressed in silk. Then August 1914 arrives and rips the world in half. Mobilization, panic, declarations of war, the Belle Epoque ends abruptly. The men who once took her to private salons are suddenly wearing uniforms and commanding lives. Border crossings are no longer romantic adventures. They are suspicious acts. Yet, Matahari continues to move. She possesses something priceless in wartime Europe, a neutral passport. The Netherlands remains outside the conflict, and neutrality becomes a corridor through the burning house. She can travel between France and the Netherlands, through Spain and Britain, when others cannot. That alone makes her interesting to intelligence services, not because she's a genius, but because she's positioned. And in espionage, position can be more valuable than talent. In the autumn of 1915, a German connected figure sees that same opportunity. A beautiful woman with access to men who matter, fluent in multiple languages, accustomed to crossing borders and entering private spaces. Recruitment looks like opportunity. The offer reportedly involves 20,000 francs and the expectation that you will seduce and report. Accounts split here. If you want a clean villain, you believe she accepted and became agent age 21. If you want ambiguity, you pay attention to the alternative, that she took the money as compensation for property seized by the Germans and declined the job while keeping the payment. Either way, the result is the same. Money changes hands. A line is crossed, and once you cross a line in wartime, you may not get to decide later what that line meant. Around the same time, British intelligence notices her. Ships docking in British ports, passengers questioned, reports written in bureaucratic language that can ruin lives, not above suspicion. The British passed their concerns to the French Dioxine Bureau under Captain Georges Ladeau. From that moment, she is watched systematically. Agents follow her through Paris, her mail is opened, her movements are documented, and the first unsettling discovery appears. Despite surveillance, the concrete evidence is thin. No maps, no coded notebooks, no smoking gun. Mostly, what they can prove is that she keeps company with men who know things. Then, Vladimir Damaslov enters her life and the tone changes. He's young, Russian, serving with French forces, wounded and partially blinded in one eye. He's described as her first true love. Whether that is romantic exaggeration or emotional truth, it changes everything because it gives her a motive that is not money. She wants a future. She wants to stop drifting between hotels and lovers, but the war makes ordinary futures impossible. Maslov returns to the front. She needs safe conduct to visit near the front lines. The gatekeepers are the same intelligence officials already watching her. Leduc proposes that she work for France by seducing German officers in neutral countries. The reward, 1 million francs, enough to retire, enough to support Maslov if the war leaves him broken. But she receives an offer without structure, No real training, no secure communication methods, no clear targets. She waits for instructions that do not come. She writes Lado through ordinary mail asking about assignments. She asks for an advance for clothes because appearance is her only weapon. It is almost tragically naive, and that naivety makes her vulnerable. By late 1916, suspicion grows. British authorities detain her again, uncertain whether she is Matahari or another agent entirely. She claims she is working for the French. The British contact Ledoux. His reported reply is chilling in its indifference. Understand nothing. Send Matahari back to Spain. Whether this reflects carelessness or calculation remains debated. Either way, she is released and travels to Madrid. In Madrid, she seduces Major Arnold von Kael, a German intelligence figure. During their meetings, he reportedly reveals plans involving submarines in Morocco. She sends this information to Ledoux. Again, there is silence, no confirmation, no reward. Encouraged by another French officer, she presses for more information, and suspicion begins to grow around her. Then, the message arrives. German intelligence transmits a radio communication identifying Agent H-21. The French intercept it through their radio listening network. Suddenly, the French have a document that appears to prove everything. But there is a disturbing detail. The Germans used a code they knew the French had already cracked, which means the message may not have been communication at all, it may have been bait. By 1917, France is facing catastrophe. The Nivelle offensive collapses into slaughter. Tens of thousands die. Soldiers begin to mutiny. The government desperately needs an explanation that does not involve its own failures. A spy becomes the perfect symbol. On February 13, 1917, Matahari is arrested in Paris and taken to Saint-Lazare prison. The interrogations begin under Magistrate Pierre Bourradon. She admits receiving money from Germans, having German lovers, building a life around seduction. In wartime, these become evidence of treason. The prosecution presents her not as a confused opportunist but as a master spy. The trial begins on July 24th, 1917. It is a military tribunal. Her lawyer, Edouard Clunet, faces severe restrictions. The case rests heavily on the intercepted radio message. Rumors circulate that she caused 50,000 French deaths. In the courtroom, she speaks a line that survives because of its defiance. A courtesan? I admit it. A spy? Never. It is not enough. On July 27th, the verdict is delivered. Guilty of espionage and treason. Sentence: death by firing squad. And so the story returns to that cold courtyard at dawn. Matahari refuses the blindfold. She faces the rifles. Witnesses later say she tried to maintain dignity until the final moment. A journalist described her death not as theatrical, but as quiet collapse. Someone watching reportedly murmured, "By God, this lady knows how to die." Afterward, the myth grows. Her body is unclaimed and used for medical study. Her head is preserved and later disappears. Stories multiply. Films, novels, legends. Was she a brilliant spy? A greedy opportunist? A victim of wartime paranoia? Decades later, when documents are declassified, they offer no clean answer. They do not prove she was a master agent responsible for massive losses. They do not completely absolve her either. They reveal something more unsettling: how easily a narrative can be created when a nation is desperate. So the question remains: was Matahari a legendary spy, or a convenient scapegoat? A cunning double agent playing both sides, or a woman who believed she could control a dangerous game and discovered too late that in wartime the state punishes not what you did, but what you represent. Because the real horror of her story may not be whether she was guilty. The real horror is that the verdict may have mattered less than the need for one. And once that need exists, it eventually finds its answer. Sometimes in a telegram, sometimes in a rumor, sometimes in a woman standing without a blindfold at dawn, refusing to look away, as 12 rifles lift in unison. Hi guys, I'm Arthur, the creator of War Never Changes. I hope you've liked this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel, leaving your like, and also to activate the bell for notifications so you can see our newest videos, right? As you guys already know, I'm a Brazilian medical student, and my dream, my quest, is for the revalidation in the US, to be a US doctor, right? Via the USMLE steps. But for that purpose, I need money, and I don't have money, so here am I. And for that purpose, I'm selling my newest ebook. It is called Love in No Man's Land, 9 True Love Stories from the First World War, right? It contains 2 main editions. The collector's edition, which contains the main book with 1 additional war love story, the 10th story, right? It also has exclusive artwork for all of our war love stories. You also get a customized 100 pages notebook for War Never Changes. You also get an insignia, the War Lover insignia. So it proves that you fought with me in this first phase project, right? And it also has some private intel. Private intel number 1. What does it contain? I cannot tell you because it is private, confidential. Only those who buy it will know. This edition, it contains only 2,500 units left, so you should run, you should buy it fast, right? Please consider buying it. But if you don't want to buy it, shame on you, actually. But it also has a standard edition. It costs only $10, and it contains the main book with 9 more love stories. So if you're interested, please consider checking the description below, the link for the book. And I hope I see you in the next videos. So thank you once more, and always remember, war never changes.